Hello friends and welcome back to another video. Today is a very special video as we have the honor and privilege of having Captain Dan Blanchard joining us to discuss UnCruises. We're going to learn specifically from him how we can sail to Alaska in 2021. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, and Alanna, I have to say, I'm excited to chat with you. Anybody who has that many boats as a captain, I'm saying anyone who has that many boats on their wall is a friend of mine.
My goodness. Well, yes, we do love to bring home some souvenirs from our trips, and when they have them in stock, we can't say no to a nice little souvenir.
Well, it makes a much better collection than spoons, I'll just say.
That is, I do know, actually, my brother-in-law has a collection of every spoon from every country that he's been to. So those can be fun as well. But of course, we're partial to having ships in our background.
Yes, indeed.
Why don't we start off by a brief introduction of yourself, tell people a little bit about you and about UnCruises.
Sure. My name's Dan Blanchard, and as you identified, I'm a captain, and that was my first entry into the business. When I was 18, I tested and passed my captain's exam, and my first job working commercially was in Glacier Bay National Park, and I was a captain of the Park Services tour boat. And that love for the outdoors has been with me all my life. I grew up on a tugboat and this kind of thing, but it was really when I started running in our business that it just came alive for me. And not many years later, I started working on small overnight cruise ships, eventually started my own company 26 years ago. Can you
Wow,
believe that?
congratulations.
I must have been maybe 20. No, no, no.
Time
But
flies.
I wish I had started when I was 20. I'd be, I'm 46. Well, I'm a little off on that one. But uh, I started a company. It was originally called American Safari Cruises, and over the first many years, switched to UnCruise Adventures. And just like the name sounds, we're kind of the antithesis of what the big ships do. We're still a ship, but we're really more associated to the adventure experiential side of the world. So we have 8 small ships that we own, one that we lease or charter in the Galapagos. And they run anywhere from as small as our private yacht, the Safari Quest, which was one of our first boats, which I will say proudly my daughter's the captain of, um,
Hmm.
to the 22 passenger Safari Quest, up to our 90 passenger boats, the Safari Endeavor and Legacy. So those are our larger boats, but most sit in that 60 to 75 range. Very intimate expedition type vessels. And so for us, UnCruise Adventures, the, the trip is less about what's on the boat and more about what's off the boat. So that's one of the big differences between the mainline cruise ship industry and UnCruise Adventures.
Right. So it's become somewhat running through your veins of, your passion for this as you kind of grew up with it and now it's a family affair with, your daughter involved as well. So where can we potentially cruise in 2021? How are things shaping up for you and specifically for all 8 ships and Alaska in general?
Yeah, as we're approaching the start of a 2021 season, really for much of the Northern Hemisphere, we've been surrounded for the last 3 weeks by really good news. We've received lots of great news on the vaccination. I know I'm in touch with my big sisters and brothers in the big cruise ship industry, as well as those in the small ship industry in the United States. And we're all seeing this lift. And, we're all making plans and ready to move forward. So for us on Cruise Adventures, we start in the Pacific Northwest and in Alaska in May. And we'll have our first trip out of my hometown in Juneau on May 16th, where we're going to depart. And that's the Wilderness Explorer. And we're very hopeful and encouraged that that will carry on right through late September before the boats head to southern destinations. So we're really believing that we have an opportunity this year with the vaccinations that are out where, you may know that there are some companies that are talking about vaccination cruises.
Mm-hmm.
We're no different, but we need to see a little lift in and knowing that those vaccinations are going to be out there. But we're very encouraged for Alaska here in just a very short period of time.
Right. It is encouraging. I completely agree and exciting with that of having, May is around the corner here. It's going to be knocking on our doorstep. So that's exciting. But I'm sure that you've had, just like everybody, the challenges of getting ready for this point of preparing for this highly anticipated season, with last year being, a wash for so many and having all of their trips canceled and kind of taking us all kind of by surprise of how long this has lasted. And, are there any specific challenges as you prepare and things that you're looking to kind of overcome?
Yeah, it's no different than really what we've all been experiencing.
Hmm.
You can go to, and like in the United States, you can go from one state to the other and have different regulations and different ways of viewing it, and they change regularly. And it's the same way with Alaska and how we operate based on what's happening with the pandemic, what's happening with the variant, what's happening with vaccine. So it is a
Right.
bit of a moving target. So if you were to look on our COVID policy, about every 2 or 3 weeks, there's a new update based on
Yeah.
what we're learning. But the thing is, we're starting to feel terra firma here. Things are starting to firm up. We're starting to get a feel
Hmm.
that the vaccine's going to be out. So for us, that means that we'll launch our Alaska trips much in the way we always have. I mean, our client and our boats really, and this is kind of the story of how we named UnCruise a little bit. But the one of the names we were thinking about was Sea Lodge, because in reality, what our boats do at UnCruise Adventures is, if you take your favorite backcountry lodge that you've ever been at, and it's right on a mountain where you might ski or go out and snowshoe or whatever, play in the summer on the bikes, whatever. And then at night while you're asleep, they just move that lodge over to a new beautiful valley or cove, and you wake up and you're in a new place. Well, that's really what uncruise is. We essentially move from place to place and wake up very close to our destination, and then we do a hub and spoke all day long, with the boat being the main hub, and then the spokes going out, which are, all day kayaking, 1 hour kayaking, strolls on the beach, paddleboarding, snorkeling, you name it, hikes that go out. And so all the guests get involved in those activities. So that really is the antithesis of uncruise adventures, along with whale watching and all that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, so we see that main product being actually more intense and stronger than ever. Partly because we're creating our own bubble, and by
Hmm.
staying out in the wilderness, we actually provide an extra level of safety to our guests, rather than mixing a lot of folks that we don't know if they've been tested, we don't know if they've been
Hmm.
vaccinated from shore. We're staying in our bubble this year, and that actually goes back to our roots, which was no port calls whatsoever. So we're kind of going back to what made us great.
Oh, okay, that's great. So there's definitely some differences, perhaps if they've cruised to Alaska before, or if they're a previous guest of uncruises, they might have a little bit of a more different experience from what they've seen previously, with really honing in on the no ports of call for keeping a bubble. And is that what you're explaining?
Yeah,
Is that
exactly. Yeah, and
okay?
we'll measure that as the season goes on, and if there's
Okay.
opportunities, Alaska is way ahead of the curve on vaccinations. Little
Hmm.
town of Haines, very close to us here in Juneau, is already at 70%. Juneau's at 30%.
That's
They actually
great.
expect the whole state will probably be wrapped up sometime, May, June, which is pretty exciting.
That is super exciting. It's definitely not going the same pace, where I am. So that's great news. So, do you have a policy on whether or not the crew and the guests have to be vaccinated, or is that to be determined?
Part of it is to be determined. Right now, we know, because the United States just signed on to an international treaty or agreement, that crew members on our boats can get vaccinations as essential workers. So our crew will be
Hmm.
completely vaccinated before we start. We already know from surveying our guests that many, and I would say we're approaching 50%, are already vaccinated. So if the Johnson and Johnson vaccine comes out and
Mm-hmm.
this rollout continues, where they think next month or next week we're going to reach 1.7 million average per day, which is pretty darn exciting. If all that really happens, we may make an announcement sometime in early March about a vaccination cruise.
Nice. And until then, have you had a solid announcement on the testing protocols while we wait for that announcement? What does that look like for those who are getting ready to sail?
Yeah, and that part of it won't change. That's going to
Hmm.
stay the same because we all know that, the vaccine just isn't a get out of jail free card. It just means you have a less chance of spreading it, less chance of getting sick. So
Right.
for us, what we have is we have our triple test. UnCruise does the test. And we have a little jingle that goes along with it, which requires a 72-hour PCR test
Hmm.
before you depart home, and then also requires 2 antigen tests that we take upon arrival on boarding day. And then we, of course, have the option of taking tests when they're away. But normal social distancing inside, and masks on, but not in your cabin, where it doesn't make sense. And on deck, when you're within 6 feet, activities are almost always social distanced out, kayak, paddle boards, hiking, beach strolls. There would be no need unless, a couple of people decided they wanted to smooch or something that didn't know each other. Might have to keep masks on those too.
Oh my goodness. That's funny.
COVID humor, kissing through a mask.
Exactly.
I don't know how that works.
Oh my goodness. So are there uh let's see here. I know there's a lot of potential of new clientele coming potentially to UnCruise's way this season with wanting to tap into Alaska because it may be a new way for them to see Alaska's beauty. I think there's some fun ways that you are welcoming guests who've had trips canceled. Is that right?
Yeah, last year when we had virtually our whole season canceled, we had about 85% of our guests stick with us that were booked by late February. And so those guests are coming back this year. Some are saying, Dan, I love you guys, but I'm going to wait till 22 or 23 when I don't need to wear my mask. And
Mhm.
others are going, I'm going. I can live with a mask. I'm going now. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of a mixed bag, but we are seeing a lot of good response to the offers we put in the marketplace. I think the fact that we are a U.S. flag, U.S. crew, U.S. built vessels, that gives us some flexibility that some of the big ship companies aren't going to have this year in North America.
Yeah, and I think you guys went even as far as extending some discounts and offers if they've previously had an Alaska cruise cancel, that they can get some discounts if they book with you guys.
Yeah, that's very true. And those discounts are always out there for our past guests and this kind of thing. But we did put some offers out to guests that are coming off the big ships. It runs out
Hmm.
at the end of this month. But some offers to kind of let those people know we're here. We're here for you. We're here for you as travel agents. The travel agents have been really keen on that. And we're just happy to be able to have a source for them to look at travel in this coming season in Alaska.
Yeah, I think that's really special to have, a way to, if the big ships don't make it and, it's the opportunity to step in with, a nice discount for an uncruise. I think that's very smart and enticing. It makes me want to go for sure. Of course, I always want to go to Alaska. I sailed 2 seasons ago, obviously not in 2020, but in 2019. Fell in love with it. Can't wait to go back. So, throwing and dangling those type of incentives out there are, sign me up. That's amazing. So very, very nice. So who can cruise on cruise?
Well, virtually anyone. I mean, we have departures that are set for families, so they can bring younger children. Uh, Most of our departures, kids have to be 12 or older, but we do have departures set aside, or we get families that charter a lot. But uncruise as far as a demographic fits everybody, but it's really
Hmm.
about a psychographic that we're about. the type of client we have is probably somebody that, for example, when they were post college, they went to Europe on $25 a day in a backpack. And now they're, in their 50s or 60s or 70s. They still have that thirst and lust for travel, but they just don't want to be camping. And so we're kind of the perfect group for them. So the adventure traveler that might go with many of the well-known brands in adventure travel finds a home on board our boats quite easily, even though it is a pseudo cruise, which traditionally that group doesn't go on big ships very often at all. So we're a good place for them to call home.
That's nice. And are those guests who are looking to potentially come back or new to explore, is there anything that potentially they would need to kind of prepare, or anything different for a cruise on UnCruise? Anything they should expect in preparation for this type of adventure sailing? Like for someone who may not have done this type of cruise before, maybe it's intimidating. Do you have to be in tip-top shape, or, are we going to be hiking all day, or what? Is there anything that I need to prepare for?
That is a really, really good question. You're very intuitive. Part of the deal is at first it can be available. We get couples, for instance, particularly when couples get into their 60s and 70s. There gets to be some kind of a disparity that sometimes builds on activity levels, and quite frankly, it's usually the guys that want to chill and the women that want to get out there and cut it up. I mean,
That's so
it's strange.
true.
It's strange that way, because you kind of, I
Yeah.
think we're accustomed to thinking it would be the other way around. But regardless of that situation, we also get multi-generational families where the 80-some-year-old matriarch, patriarch brings the kids and the grandkids. So whether they want to sit on deck, have a hot tub, read a book, maybe take a skiff ride out with the whales or through the ice, they can do that and not need to. If they can put a life jacket on, they can go out, right? So it's minimal. But then at the same time, the wife who's turned into a runner at 65, which again happens,
Yeah.
she can just go out and cut up the trails with her adventurous teammates. And whether it's a 1 hour stroll or a all day long hike, they can do that.
That's excellent. So you mentioned a little bit of some of those unique experiences with getting on the kayaks and things like that to go see whale watching. What are some of those other experiences that UnCruise offers that you really can't get anywhere else?
Well, I would say for the most part, pretty much everything we do is rarely done in Alaska.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. I mean, we kind of, even amongst my small ship friends, we kind of own the adventure side of the business, and we're also the largest small ship operator in Alaska. So I think that we can definitely tout all those things, but there are certain activities that you're not going to find everywhere. They can go on what we call a yak and wax, or it could be a whack and yak. And what that is a yak is a kayak, and a whack is a bushwhack where there's no trail. So somebody could go on a bushwhack for a couple hours where no human being may have ever stepped in all of time, or they could hop in a kayak and take an hour-long kayak and then take a bushwhack to be a yak and whack. And they could also, we're the first company that brought snorkeling to Alaska. We put
Oh,
on these
wow.
big 17 mil suits, 10
Like the
on the
dry
bottom, and
suits?
the
Oh,
wetsuits.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wetsuits.
And
Okay.
yeah. And usually we do that on itineraries that are out more towards the open, not in open water, but out towards the open areas. And because the water's clear, it's not filled up with, silt from the glaciers and this kind of thing. But that is a thing that UnCruise owns. And of course, I think we're still the only overnight company that has stand-up paddleboards, I think. Not quite sure
Oh
on
my
that one.
gosh.
Yeah.
So what's the water temperature when you do something like that?
Cold. It's cold. I mean,
Oh my, I can't
most of
imagine.
the, oh yeah, well, but you remember you're in a very heavy wetsuit. Have you ever
But
seen,
still.
do you remember when you were a kid, there was a Big O tire commercial, and that they
Yeah.
had, or the Michelin tire guy, I can't
Yeah.
remember which. It's almost like that. You kind of walk around, but when you get in the water, it's not so cold. But yeah, the water temperatures, typically if you're not up near the glaciers or right at a river, it's going to be a little below 50. But if you
Okay.
get it up at the glaciers or, near a glacier fed stream, you could easily jump down into the 30s in a heartbeat.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. That is definitely a unique experience for sure. And I know in previous years, land and sea opportunities to see even more of Alaska's beauty is an option. Does any of that change for 2021 with having those offerings as well, or does it stay the
They're
same?
still out there, which is really good. Being an Alaskan, when the cruise ships, looks like they're not going to be able to come. And if that ends up being the final case, uh, you would think that a lot of the lodges would shut down in the interior, but the reality is they're staying open.
That's
And
great
even
news.
some of the cruise ship owned lodges are staying open, hoping that they can get individual travelers. So we see our interior product operating. We're right in the midst of kind of adding some tour possibilities in Juneau that are
Hmm.
multi-day, in case people just feel like, I want to go through this whole process once rather than twice of coming into the state and having to get tested. So I'm just going
Yeah.
to stay in Juneau. And so we're developing things in the Juneau area that'll be available on the boat and just before sailing as well.
That's a really unique opportunity. In part of it is like you're there already. Immerse yourself if you have the time to explore and see it all too. And on the flip side, I'm sure, being there this season is going to be like no other and really give you an added benefit because you're going to have so much of the experience to yourself and be so much more personalized and catered and almost a little bit spoiled in the sense because being the only ship there and it's just so much left untouched in a sense.
Well, it's really interesting because it's true that with the large ships not there, it not only takes, the waterways and it makes things, just less crowded and the
Hmm.
waterways are always usually pretty darn good. But in town, like I live in downtown Juneau. And the thing that's happening there is what we're seeing is the local businesses are starting up, the different shops in town and this kind of thing. But, your Diamonds International and all that stuff that's kind of just noise, quite frankly, they're not opening. So what you're getting is
Yeah,
you're getting a more authentic Alaska experience than you typically would.
I love that. That's fantastic. More authentic experiences. Uh, I don't know how to phrase it, but it's just a wonderful idea. I love that.
So too, yeah. But don't get me wrong. I I'm no big ship basher. I'm just pulling out the advantages that happen to be here at this particular year. Yeah.
No, exactly. And that's what I'm on to that same point as well, is that you got to see it with the other side of the coin and seeing the good and all of the bad in the
Yeah.
sense of that it brings you the lucky opportunities. So I think that
Keeps us
is
sane,
a
I think, all of us.
true as well. We have to see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will.
Well, friends, that does it. I hope you enjoyed learning from Captain Dan Blanchard how we can cruise to Alaska this season and all about UnCruise Adventures. If you enjoyed the video, show your support by smashing the thumbs up button and check out these other two videos that you might enjoy as well. Until next time, ciao for now.